Hi everyone, and welcome to Shifts Happen. As always with these 1 hour sessions, we are covering a huge topic in a short amount of time. So this is by no means intended to be an exhaustive session on this, but actually just to start to explore a different way of doing things. So we all want security in our playing because it's so hard to play just for starters. Yet for most of us, actually shifts remain a constant point of insecurity. So the question is, how can we reconceptualize these moments and therefore have a different experience in our playing? As always, it's fun with these questions to start by running simple experiments on our brains and bodies away from the instrument so we can see what type of patterns of movement we would be selecting in normal life. I'll just put my violin down. So let's start. Pick a spot on the floor a little way in front of you and just jump over to it. Very simple. Did anyone miss? Did anyone fall over? Chances are we're all pretty successful at this. We looked, we aimed, we leapt, and bingo, there we are. So let's mess this around a little bit. So pick a different spot, and this time, just as you're about to jump and you get ready to jump, imagine someone comes and talks to you just in that moment, and just stay there for a little bit and notice what happens to the jump when you get stuck down there. Hard to jump, right? Now this time, instead of picking a spot, imagine I asked you to jump, but I asked you to jump with your eyes closed, or you were trying to jump in the dark. That actually is really scary to us, and we probably actually wouldn't jump. This time, third exercise, try jumping. You can pick exactly the same spot, but this time try dragging a foot. So here we go. I'm going to drag my left foot. Here we go. Obviously tricky. And lastly, I'm going to try jumping, but I'm actually going to send my arms first. So here we go. Let's try this one. Also tricky. So these are actually all similar things that we do when we are shifting, and they give us a sense of insecurity. But conversely, every one of us was actually successfully able to jump when we simply picked a spot and just jumped. So as with lots of aspects of technique, we have developed rather elaborate solutions to solve our shifting issues that are actually very foreign to our brains and bodies. But when we look at our brains and bodies in daily life, we have a built-in solution. It's ready-made, and we can all leap brilliantly. So let's define the term leap. We use the word leap because we tend to think of shifting as changing positions. But when we understand it as leaping, we realize that there's actually a whole range of situations beyond just changing positions that requires us to leap. For example, we often have to leap to cross strings. Think of getting from just the top note of a melody line in some Bach to the bottom note of a chord. So leaps actually are not just in the domain of the left arm either. They are actually in our bow arm too. And the bow is leaping all the time also. We tend to call that taking the bow off the string, but in fact, it's exactly the same physical motion as the left arm when it changes position or crosses strings. It's a leap. So we are obviously talking on a miniature scale here, but like all aspects of our playing, we tend to think of things as if they are blown up to movie screen size, but in reality, they are specks of things. They're just eyelash size, but eyelash size for us on our instruments is actually monumental. So a leap is anything that requires us to let go of where we are and go somewhere else. There's a reason for using the word leap rather than shift. When we leap, we are sending ourselves from one place to another with momentum, with energy and propulsion. There's a prep, a go, and a landing, and we're really successful at doing this. So let's start looking at the component parts, and then we can look at their application in our playing. So first thing to consider is that a leap is always a two-note event. We have to recognize that any note requires two notes or two places in order to function. There has to be a leap-off moment in order to create the propulsion that we need. we tend to just see the new note, but actually the note before is essential because it gives us a place from which to leap and create that propulsion. When the note is short, that short note becomes the leap off note, just like walking and then immediately jumping. But if it's a long note and is sustained, it's rather like us standing and chatting to someone before we jump. We will actually need to choose a precise moment at the end of the note to create that leap off moment. We'll clarify this more when we look at the prep movement in the forearm. But the key point here is that when we leap with our legs, there is a precise moment from which we leap, and we have to have the same in our playing or we'll be dragging ourselves around. So this gives us the leap off note or leap off moment. What does the body do on the leap off note or moment? So if you walk around the room a bit, choose a spot to jump to, and then make your jump, you'll actually notice all the necessary components of the prep movement in the body when we jump. So we walk around, you can do this, we see where we want to jump to, and there is a momentary pause while we make this prep movement to leap. This prep movement takes us more deeply towards the floor. We're not pushing with our feet, we're not digging with the feet, but we are more profoundly connected to the floor in order to gather that necessary momentum. Then we go, there's a ping, a boink, whatever you want to call it. Our feet feel springy and we're suddenly in that new place. That timing and that experience of the prep movement is exactly the same in our playing. We obviously don't feel it in our legs, but we do actually feel it in the forearm. So the forearm, should roll my sleeve up, the forearm is always the initiator of movement, and we refer to the chunky, when we say forearm, we're referring to the chunky bit down here, the bottom of the forearm. So the forearm is always the initiator of movement, and the shoulder and the upper arm have to follow in proportion and perfectly synchronized so that they're not inhibiting the movement. What about our fingers? So they do play a role, actually, just like our feet when we jump. So when you jump, if you think about what your feet feel like, our feet feel springy, and they feel springy in response to the leg. It's really an easy thing to feel. We've got that nice aliveness in the feet. So likewise with the end of the finger, or fingers, if we're playing multiple notes, they feel springy in response to the forearm. They feel alive on the string. So this combination of having a precise moment or note to leap off, a prep movement from the forearm, and that springy feel on the end of the finger or fingers enables us to be sent over to the new place with propulsion. Let's look at the shelf life of that prep movement in the forearm. We actually looked at this a little bit when we were messing around with our jumping. We need to understand this shelf life in order to actually make sense of how we time leaps in our playing and what we can do if leaping off short notes or long notes requires us to wait in a place. We can particularly get stuck actually in long notes and slow playing. So we're going to walk around the room again. Take your time, pick your spot to jump, and this time when you stay down, as if you were, let's try that again. As you're getting ready to jump, stay down in that moment and notice when you hit the shelf life of that propulsive feel. It's actually a very short shelf life. So I can walk around, get ready to jump, someone starts talking to me or something interrupts me, and almost immediately we've hit the shelf life of that prep movement. So it's pretty tiny. That means we realize we can't wait on a prep or it's going to lose its propulsive quality. So this brings us to something really, really important and hugely helpful. The tempo of the music is not the speed of a leap. Every one of us jumps at about the same speed. That jump speed is actually built into our system because we recognize the need for propulsion. We can't actually jump at a wide variety of speeds. This is less limiting than it sounds. So supposing you're out for a walk and you get to a stream and you're going to jump over the stream. You can amble up to the stream. You could walk briskly up to the stream. You could run up to the stream. You could even dance up to the stream, and you can continue those actions on the other side. But the jump over the stream is actually pretty uniform. Most of us try and shift in the tempo and mood of the music, but we can't. We'll just be dragging ourselves around. The body leaps within a pretty small range of speeds, and that's it. We can play at different tempos and we can express any mood we like, but we really can't leap at a wide variety of speeds. So what this means is that in slow playing, the leap is still pretty fast. We have ways to color them so that they're not disruptive to the line of the music and they can sound legato. And conversely, in fast playing, they feel leisurely. We have ways to create the necessary space for them to happen so that we're actually not in a hurry. So to sum this up, any kind of leap, however tiny, is on the staccato spectrum, meaning we have to let go. We can color and shade them to sound legato or to have any articulation we want, but they are physically in the staccato family. So next we come to what we might need in our toolbox to arrive in the right place. We have to know where we're going. We need geography. And this involves touch, peripheral vision, and obviously sound. In terms of the sound, this is the world of intervals, which is actually a whole topic of its own. But notes exist in their relationship to each other, and any leap will involve intervals. The notes we are leaping from and to are stitched together by their intervallic relationship, which means two things. It's the sound and their specific geography on our particular instrument. So perfect fifths are a great example. They're lovely with their clean geographic parallels and actually the need to often leap across a string to play them. Let's come to touch. This is super interesting. If we close our eyes and use our hands to feel something as if we had no sight, we actually adopt an incredibly light, delicate touch. So just take a second. You can do it on your face. You can put your hands on your table, whatever is close by. What's so interesting about that touch is we select that touch because it gives us maximum information through the skin on our fingers. If we pressed or touched hard, we wouldn't gain as clear a picture. So when we're playing, we're actually touching all kinds of things, including the strings, right? But not only the strings. We've also got all the wood around the instrument. And this actually gives us vast amounts of information as to where we are. We have to get off the point of sound or we can't leap, but that actually doesn't mean we lose touch. There is a world of touch actually going on. And in situations where we really have to completely leave the point of sound or the strings, it's actually interesting to note that we're still touching lots of the instrument or the furniture, as I sometimes call it. It just may not be the strings. I often actually refer to this whole world of touch as sub-touching because it's different to how we touch the instrument to generate sound. It gives us an amazing world of sensory information. There's another aspect of this that we should include here. In much of our traditional shifting work, sliding along the strings and hearing the slide has been used to give us auditory and spatial information. We actually don't lose that when we understand this world of sub-touching. We're actually gaining more of it, as our ears are not oblivious to this delicate touch either. We're actually really good at hearing this sort of cobweb of touching and the range of sounds that produces. We also obviously need our eyes, right? Anyone who's walked in the dark, run in the dark, let alone jumped in the dark, knows how uncomfortable that is. But our eyes are interesting. It doesn't mean we're staring at the instrument. What we are actually doing is we're taking in vast amounts of information through peripheral vision. And we can actually do the same on our instrument. We can be highly aware of our peripheral vision without needing to make something the focal point of what we're looking at. So look before you leap is actually a good idea, as it turns out. Sometimes with ourselves and our students, we actually have to turn up the volume or turn the dial up on our peripheral vision. Many times we're unaware of how we use it, but just bringing it onto the radar usually works. So to summarize the necessary elements, we need a leap-off note or a leap-off moment if the note is sustained, so we know exactly when we are going, in order that the prep movement can function within its short shelf life. We need to feel the propulsive prep movement from the forearm, but the ends of the fingers have that springy quality similar to our feet when we jump. We need to know exactly where we're going, and this involves using peripheral vision, intervallic relationships in both sound and instrument geography, and this incredibly sensitive touch or sub-touching that gives us maximum information. So I'm going to hand over to Nora, who's going to talk more about the leap-off note and leap-off moment and how we can start to control the playing and gain the security of knowing we've arrived before we make the sound, and also how we can start to shade the sound so that we don't have holes in our playing.
Hi everyone. All right, so I will be following on from Sophie's introduction with some more information on the timing of leaps and on how we experience that timing in the body. And you are all warmly invited to try what I'm demonstrating along with me, since I think really feeling this stuff for ourselves is what makes it possible to hold onto the information in a real way rather than having it stay sort of in the realm of the theoretical. All right, so you heard Sophie mention the forearm a few moments ago as the engine of really all of our left arm movements on the instrument, and leaping is no different. In fact, one of the core principles of the TIL approach in general is the sanctity of what we would call the finger, hand, and forearm unit, which might sound sort of technical, but it actually really isn't mysterious at all. So if you just touch your eyebrow, and then your opposite ear, and then your chin, or kind of whatever you want. And especially if you look in the camera or the mirror while you do this, you'll notice that you instinctively bring your fingers, hand, and forearm as an aligned unit from one place to another. So that's just how we're organized. We're engineered to organize our movements, and we actually do it all day long with objects without even noticing that we're doing it. So if we can apply that understanding about the finger, hand, and forearm unit to our leaping, we are really setting ourselves up for success. All right, so let's explore this face touching a little bit more, because if we really zoom in on this experience, we're going to find even more here beyond the basic finger, hand, and forearm alignment that we can use to clarify the logic of our leaping on the instrument. So first of all, can you feel that, especially if you're moving between spots that are further away from each other, that the leaving of the old spot on your face actually has a gently propulsive quality to it? Can you feel that? And where do we feel that? So if we were together live, I would just invite somebody to answer that question, but for right now, you can just feel into it for yourself and see what you notice. And you'll probably notice two things in particular. So first of all, the finger or fingers that are touching have a springy quality to that touch in the finger pads, in the same way that the bottoms of our feet have sort of a springy, responsive quality to them when we walk or leap. So just imagine for a second trying to leap with the bottoms of your feet being dead. Just try it for a second. It's actually basically impossible, right? So we need that springy, soft, responsive quality in our feet and also in our fingers for our leaping. So we also have what we would call resilience in all of the fulcrums of our fingers, hand, wrist, and arm. And when I say resilience, what I mean is that our joints have a bit of give to them, but then they stop giving, bounce back, and hold their shape. So it's exactly the same way that our knees and ankles bend when we're preparing for a leap, let's say, but then they stop bending so that we can use the deeper connection to the ground to propel ourselves off the ground. So if you don't know what I mean, just for a second, try leaping with your knees and ankles totally locked. also extremely difficult, right? Okay, now let them bend during your downward prep, and keep bending and keep bending. And clearly we're not getting off the ground this way, right? Okay. So the fulcrums of our fingers, hand, wrist, and arm also need to be resilient in order for our leaping to work. That is, they're neither stiff nor floppy. Okay, so how about that famous forearm? So as we hop from spot to spot on our faces, can everyone feel where that ping sensation, right, that sends us from place to place is actually coming from? It's actually this chunky bit way down here in the forearm. All right, so now that we've sort of analyzed that propulsive quality, what if we omit that propulsive leap off quality as we move around our face? So just try that. Try totally getting rid of that propulsive quality of your leap. So can you feel how different this movement is now? So if we have no propulsion, our only choice is to lift the arm, yeah, or drag it across our face like that, which is sort of similar to what can happen on the instrument. And can you feel how much more laborious and slow this is for the arm? Interesting. All right, so let's just try this on the instrument for a moment. So, first of all, can you feel those springy fingers and the resilient, when I say springy fingers, I mean the pads of the fingers are sort of soft, springy quality to them. So springy finger pads and this resilient finger, hand, and forearm unit. Feel both of those things during that prep moment. And then, can you feel that ping down here in the forearm that sends us off that prep? Yeah, and you can leap far, you can leap close, you can leap to any finger, you can leap upwards or downwards. And it's got that same organization, right? All right, so now that we can feel the physical organization of the leap within that finger, hand, and forearm unit, let's talk a little bit more about the timing. So Sophie already talked about the need for a prep moment, right? And the short shelf life of that prep. So what that means is that for our leaps to be successful, we actually have to be really clear about exactly when we are going. And one of the ways that we can clarify that for ourselves is with what we would call a click, which sounds like this. So if the note is pretty short, let's say an eighth note, then the timing of that click, go moment is going to be pretty obvious, right? But if I've got to stay on a long note and then leap, that's when things get really interesting. So let's try this. Just pretend that you are walking along and then you stop for a while to chat with someone or enjoy a beautiful sunset, and then you have to jump over a puddle. Let's just do that one more time. So we're walking, step, 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 we stop and hang out, and then we leap over the puddle. So this is basically the same as if we had to say, play quarter notes, right? And then play a whole note with a leap at the end. And what's super clear from this walking example is that we need to know exactly when the prep for that leap off note is happening, because we're sure as heck not going to be preparing for the leap during that whole note, right? All right, so if I played that, it would sound something like this. All right, let me do that one more time. So hopefully that makes sense. And you know what? I know it seems silly, but it really is helpful to make yourself do the click out loud, because it makes the timing of that moment so crystal clear. So let's try something now. Just pick notes of, you can do varying lengths, but make sure to include some longer ones too, and it can be really whatever you want. And see if you can make that click sound and hear exactly the timing of that click sound and how that aligns with that propulsive moment that's going to send you off the leap off note. Let's just try it. Just play some random stuff. now that we've talked about the timing of the leap off notes, well, now how about the timing of the note, of playing the note, that when you arrive? Let me say that one more time. Now how about the timing of playing the note when you arrive? All right, so imagine for a moment that you have a leap followed by a short rest, let's say. How might that affect the timing of the leap? So to answer that question, we first have to observe the principle that we have to wait where we're comfortable. Okay, so that sounds nice, right? Wait where you're comfortable, but what does it actually mean? So since our bodies are fundamentally in a relationship with gravity, what that means is that for us to be comfortable while waiting to play a note, we need to be in a state of resting down while we are waiting. We need to have arrived at a stable resting point with the entire finger, hand, and forearm unit. So that, by the way, includes an adjustment over the fulcrums of the feet or sit bones if you're seated. Yeah, and this is true for any kind of leap, right? That when the arm is changing locations, we need to accompany that movement in the arm with an adjustment over the fulcrums over the feet or sit bones. So that adjustment will be more noticeable the bigger the leap and also the bigger your instrument. But if the body doesn't adjust over those fulcrums as the arm moves in space, we're definitely not going to feel balanced and stable when we get there. All right, so getting back to the timing. So for us to feel stable, we need to arrive at a feeling of resting down. So we cannot be floating, we can't be suspended, we can't be hovering. However, resting down does not necessarily mean being on the point of sound, which is the depth of string required to produce a clear pitch. So we can actually be fully resting down comfortably on the surface of the string, or even, as the case may be, a tiny, tiny bit above the string. In the same way that you can actually plop your arm around in space and have a pretty clear sense of arrival and resting down, even if you don't land on anything. So we call this a distinction between resting down on the surface of the string or just above it versus actually being at the point of sound, the difference between over versus on. So being over a note means that we can arrive and rest down stably in a clear vertical connection with the pitch that we're about to play. We wait as long as needed and then go to the point of sound when we're ready to play that note. And this is a tremendously powerful capacity because it gives us complete control of the timing and quality of that note, even if we've traveled a great distance to get there. So this capacity of over versus on is really part of a larger principle that relates to leaping, which is the principle of go early, play late. So if you think back to that example of having a leap followed by a rest, we have two choices, right? If we accept the principle that the prep for that leap is extremely time limited for it not to lose its propulsive quality, then we can either wait on the old spot, leap and play immediately, or we can leap, wait as long as needed over the new note, and then play. And if you think about it, isn't it much more sensible to go and wait rather than delaying and then arriving all flustered? So if we have given ourselves that window of time after we've arrived, it means we have total control over how we play that note. This tiny window of going early to an over and then playing means that we can see, feel, and hear that we're on the new pitch before we play. And that is golden. It's all the security that we could possibly want, knowing that we have arrived and then we have all the time in the world to actually express the note. So everybody try that. Just pick some random notes. Feel the propulsive leap that sends you stably over the new note, either at the surface of the string or just above it, resting down. Wait as long as you want, and then go to the point of sound. So the last thing that I'll say about the topic of timing relates back to Sophie's allusion to the concept of staccato, by which we don't necessarily mean a stylistic articulation, but rather the idea of how we buy ourselves time for a leap through tonal decay. So we've already talked about how leaping slowly just doesn't really work. And that's on one end of the tempo spectrum. But on the other end of the tempo spectrum is leaping fast. And the fact is, no matter how lightning quick that propulsive moment is, leaping means traveling a greater distance than we would be if we were staying in the same position on the same string, right? Which requires time. And the way that we find that time for ourselves is through the staccato. So basically using decay to shorten a note prior to a leap, and therefore buy ourselves the technical window to arrive stably over the next note and then enjoy complete ease and control in playing it. So it might sound something like this. And you can try that for yourself if you want. Just try and play some short notes. And then the last note, immediately prior to the leap, will have an extra staccato in there that will buy you that lovely time to be over in the note before you finally play it. All right, so for that to work, however, that really requires that the bow really understands its role in creating the tonal logic in the sound that's needed for these moments of staccato to work both technically and musically. And for that, I will pass it over to Rachel.
Hi everyone. There are two aspects of the bow in relation to leaps that we can begin to touch on today. The first one is what happens with the bow arm when we're leaping with the left. And the other thing is the workings of how the bow, how we leap with the bow alone and together when we also have a leaping left arm. So a leaping bow and a leaping left arm. When the left is leaping, the bow, which is of course our sculptor of what we hear, the audible sound, is either creating a separated sound or non-legato, in other words, between the leap, which is, of course, as Sophie and Nora have spoken about, the left hand creates, varying lengths of staccato. It's a spectrum of staccato. Or it is creating a legato sound when the left hand is leaping within a slur, or it could also be separate bows, but sounding legato, sounding long with possible portamenti between notes. The bow can also, of course, be leaping at the same time as the left arm leap. So let's start with when the bow is creating a non-legato sound during the left arm leap. Nora has spoken about the click moment, which is our send-off moment to leap in leaping speed. So our arm is launched to another spot on the fingerboard. At the start of the leap-off note, the bow makes a trajectory, which is what some of you are familiar with, the term bow shaping. So the leap-off note creates this trajectory, which has a natural decay in it. And at this moment of decay, it invites the left hand to leap. I'm just going to try and show you an undershape on a down bow. So the forearm makes the shape. Of course, we're playing over the fulcrum of our feet. I'm just going to play a B with an undershape. You'll hear that decay, and it's starting to create this moment of opportunity for the left hand to leap. So this is it's now creating this window, and the left arm knows that there's a legitimate space in which it can leap easily. I'm just going to show you that undershape again, and I'm going to leap from first finger B to a third finger F sharp on the A string. Excuse my squeaky gut strings at the moment. At this point, it's important to acknowledge the concept of over versus on that Nora talked about, not only for the left hand, but with the bow. When we've sent ourselves to the new arrival note with the left arm, in order for us to feel stable and to have complete tonal control over that note, there's a minute moment of being settled over the note before we actually engage with the point of sound fully with the left arm and the bow. So this over versus on moment is a really critical one to explore, not only with the left arm, as Nora mentioned, but with the bow as well. It can rest gently above the point of sound on the string, or very, very gently just above the string, but mostly we want to feel this sort of very gentle resting moment. But it's very crucial that we feel stable and we're resting but not on the point of sound. So I'm going to show you how we reach that point of over. So it feels very settled in the arm. So it encourages the bow to feel settled and ready, even for that really minute amount of time. So if we go back to our sending moment, we've sent our left arm to the new arrival point at leaping speed. Then we're stably waiting there ready to play. We can then time the actual playing of the string any way we like. We could play it quickly for a short, sort of sharp articulation. We can play it slowly. The playing of that left arm playing of the string really cues the bow to respond with the sound that we want. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. We'll do a staccato. I'll do the leap and then time it in a staccato way. Or a longer way. You can see how I'm timing the string more slowly with the forearm. So it's really magic, actually, when you think about this go early, play late thing. We can feel very, very settled and have a lot of control over the sound that we're wanting. If we want the left arm to sound legato within a slur, essentially the bow is again creating that beautifully timed window for the left to go. The bow does need to wait for the left's arrival, of course, but it doesn't mean that there are holes in the sound. So it will sound legato. It's slightly magical concept. And yeah, so there's a moment where the bow slows within the shape, as we saw when I demonstrated that first under shape with the forearm. Then the shape will gain momentum close to the actual moment of arrival and close to that point of engagement with the point of sound by the right and the left forearms. So if we want to add a portamento or a slide into the note, the timing of this left-right engagement happens a little earlier. The timing of the left engagement, cueing the bow to engage more as well. I'll show you what I mean. So this is the same example of the first finger B to the F sharp, but within a slur. So let's move on to actual bow leaps. Sometimes it can take a little bit of a brain shift to think of leaps happening with the bow arm, but when you think about it, they actually happen all the time. A leap, of course, is just moving from one point to another. So we're doing that all the time when we're playing. And these bow leaps carry all the same ingredients as a left arm leap. So we end a note with the bow arms resting down moment, no matter how small that is. Then we have a very precise new arrival point on the bow hair for our arm to leap to. We give ourselves a timing. The click is often really, really helpful. Send ourselves, again with the bow shape, to the arrival point. So unless we're landing on an open string, we arrive over the new note with the left hand and the bow is cued to play. So if both left and right are leaping at the same time, which of course often happens as well, we need to be especially aware of calibrating this movement over the fulcrum of the feet, as we've talked about. For example, in a more extreme case, when our arms are leaping close together, for example, at the tip on the E string, let's say we're going from a first finger F sharp on an upper string to a higher position on the G string at the heel. So we're leaping from here to here. If we don't do that adjustment over the feet, then we end up feeling very cramped and the arm feels very held up. So it's a great one to practice, feeling those two arms coming closer together and how our body moves slightly further back to accommodate those arms coming closer together. While you're looking, sort of exploring through this world of bow leaps, look out for hidden ones. For example, tiny retakes with the bow. We need to sort of get rid of this idea that we're really lifting the bow from one place to another, but that we're actually sending from one resting moment to another, which gives ourselves momentum no matter what the tempo is. So if it's a slow tempo, as Sophie and Nora have spoken about, it doesn't mean at all that we have to leap with a slow tempo, which is quite a comforting thought. So there are leaps for the retakes, leaps between, for example, playing close to the bridge and then going to playing over the fingerboard. That's also a leap. There's all sorts of leaps which you may be surprised about. For example, the one Sophie mentioned, going from an upper string single note to a chord, for example, in Bach, can involve bow leaping as well. So I'm going to pass over to Sally, who's going to delve into pedagogy of leaping.
Hello! You have heard a lot of information about shifting, or as you have probably become used to the term leaping now. And now it's my turn to talk about it in terms of teaching it to our students. Lots of people, when they registered, asked about this for their students. So here we go. These are my thoughts. We've heard, as I've already said, lots of detail about what does go into a leap or a shift. And we've talked a lot about jumping, and we've talked about jumping over rivers. And these analogies are incredibly useful. But if we think back to the first time we jumped over a small body of water, no one really taught us how to do it. No one said to us, we have a prep moment and then a go and a landing. We just saw it as one thing. We throw ourselves over that river. And if you had never jumped over a river before and someone did talk you through it in this detailed way, we would potentially end up overthinking it, and this would be to the detriment of the leap. We also don't want to do this with shifting, as we don't want to add anxiety about this subject before our pupils have even tried it. In fact, the whole TIL project pedagogical approach uses movements. We know movements we use all the time in everyday life. We refer to these movements as being physically logical. These are movements that make sense to our brain and can be executed with ease. And therefore, in our beginners, it's our first port of call really to trust that they will choose a physically logical movement to do this if they are asked to shift or leap for the first times in a safe environment, which I will go on to describe. So let's not build anxiety in our students. Let's not give them shifting baggage. Let's make sure we open it up to them to move in a physically logical way. So that begins with something important to us, which is left arm gym. And left arm gym builds up confidence in moving around the whole instrument from the very beginning. And this really does provide essential foundations for leaping. Being able to move around our instruments with ease begins with our phrase, which is calibrating over the feet or the sit bones. And Nora touched on this, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with this idea of calibrating our bodies over our feet or our sit bones, let's just stand up and give it a go. So if we stand up and swing our arms, I should just interject here and say that if you are a cellist, you might like to do this sitting down, because obviously you will be sitting down to play and you will be moving over your sit bones. But we are going to do it as upper strings, moving over our feet. So we are standing up and swinging our arms. As you're doing this, what do you notice in your body? And what do you notice in your feet and sit bones? When we put this out to the audience, people say things like, I can feel how my balance is adjusting over my feet. And that would be absolutely right. Our bodies are moving and our feet respond to this to make it feel balanced and good. So let's just run a little experiment and repeat this, or keep swaying and swinging, but don't let your feet or sit bones respond. Put them into frozen mode. And how does it feel now? And answers that we get at this stage are our arms feel all jammed up and our bodies feel all jammed up, which I think we'll all agree is the absolute last thing that we want when we are going to leap or shift on our instruments. And just as a little aside, when I'm practicing and a leap doesn't work out for me, the first go-to is to check in with my feet. And it's pretty common that my leap hasn't worked, and it's pretty common at that point that my feet were in frozen mode and not responsive mode. So for me, this is always my go-to. Am I calibrating over my feet? Are the soles of my feet alive to the movements that I'm making with my arms? And in fact, this calibration idea is fundamental to the whole technique. So let's move on to the left arm gym that I talked about. And this is something that I do with groups of 30 children, groups of 60 children, and I do it with these groups on mixed instruments, violins, violas, cellos and basses, but I also do it with one child or two children in a room. So it's absolutely adaptable across the whole teaching spectrum. So let me grab my violin, and it's very useful for us to know that our arms can move and our shoulders and bodies move underneath our instruments when we've got them in playing position. So we do a lot of swinging like this, and one of the exercises that I like to do is we'll go backwards, forwards, and we'll swing up and we'll tap on our shoulders like this. So it just allows us to feel that plop, and it allows us to feel that we can move underneath our instruments. For cellos, I'm not sure whether I can demonstrate this very well, and double basses, I tend to get them to do it with both hands like this, and then they come up and they tap both shoulders like this. The next thing for violins is it's really, really useful for them to spend time here. As I said, we want to not make them think that this is playing the violin. We want them to know from the very, very beginning that they can move their hand to here, or here, or here, or touch their nose while they're holding their violin, and all that sort of thing. So this here is called the C-bout. I didn't actually know that it was called that until a couple of months ago. And we will do backwards, forwards, C-bout. You can hear that I'm kind of doing this to a rhythm, and with my big groups, yes, I will have a backing track on, and we will do this in time as a group. It's a bit like Zumba for violinists and cellists and double basses and violas. They're all in the room together. So this is tapping our C-bout for violins, which is very, very useful. When it comes to what do the cellos and basses do while they're in the C-bout, I get the cellos to tap with their left hand. I get them to tap their bridges, and it gets them to sort of feel that feeling of wrapping around their instrument and being able to access other bits of the instrument. Double basses, that's simply too far, so I found that getting them to tap on the fingerboard is a useful thing. Again, we're doing this in time to a backing track, and everyone is in the swing. The next exciting thing that I find is really useful, and this is obviously building up, moving around the instrument and playing in high positions, which is what we have to do once we've done the leap. We do gobble position. So I get them to put their thumb underneath the strings like this, and the cellos and double basses do the same, and we can gobble our E string and our A string, our D string and our G string. So we'll go backwards, forwards, and up. Gobble, 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 gobble. And I get the cellos and basses doing the same. Why shouldn't they explore their instruments in the same way? And then finally we'll swing and we'll tap. We'll get four fingers, across four strings. And we can obviously all do that. Cellos, 4 fingers across 4 strings. And we do this all over the instrument, wherever we fancy landing. So you give them the creativity to choose. We can come here, we can come here, we can come here. So they're kind of getting really comfortable with the idea that they can move, basically. And next one I like doing is that they can just simply trace the shape of the instrument. This can be a calm thing that you can do with some calm music on, or you can, if you think the need is there, pretend that you are all on skateboards and you are having a race around your instruments. So I'll leave it up to you as to which mode of transport you think it needs to be. And we end up with some lateral movement, which is simply coming up from the lower pitches to as far as the bridge. And sometimes I start this off with scroll to nose. And obviously this is replicable for the cellos and the basses. Just go back to our lateral movement, and we can just take a few moments to just freeze our feet and feel how that feels. And I can feel immediately that that is more tiring. And then if we unfreeze our feet and put them into responsive mode, how this feels much better again. So that is our left arm gym, very important for the foundations of leaping. So once we've done all that lovely movement, how is this going to translate into actually leaping on our instruments? I think it would be pretty common that violins and violas will do their first leaps from first position to third position, and from cellos from first position to fourth position. And it's really important that they really know their different positions before we start moving between the two of them. And by starting to build up this information, we like our students to have a really strong visual image of each of the positions. So we spend a lot of time drawing fingerboard maps. I'm going to show you now the cello, fourth position fingerboard map. I wanted to show you the rustic version to show you this is just very quick to put together in class, and you can do it with children on whiteboards if they have them, or obviously on scraps of paper. And here is our violin third position map. And we get really quick and really good at being able to draw those and assimilating that knowledge. We also play a lot of tunes simply in both positions, not combining the two, but in both positions. And once this is really strong, then we can have a mix of positions within a piece. I should have said also that we play a lot of scales in both of those positions. So I'm going to put up a piece of music now, which would be one of the first pieces of music where they would do a leap actually within a piece. I would tell them that we are going to jump from one position to another, and we would definitely do a little bit of jumping around the room because it's fun. And I would simply label for them within this piece of music the position that they should play in for each chunk of the tune. Then I would label the leap off note and the landing note, and I think it's quite fun to have a springy picture of a ball because it gives them this idea that they're going to go with propulsion. And then generally I would just wait and see what they do at the leap movement, and hopefully, because they've got good strong knowledge of where they're going through having been in those positions an awful lot and from drawing the fingerboard maps, etc., plus the fact that they've got all those movements from doing all the left arm gym, plus the fact that they know it's a leap thing, they tend to do this exercise for the first time really pretty successfully and find themselves in their new position. So it's a pretty fun way to start leaping, because for me, I really don't want them to find it something that they're anxious of. So there's the music on the screen. If you want to grab your instruments, you can have a little play of that so you can feel how those leaps work. Next slide I'm going to put on the screen just shows how we do the first leaps within scales. And we can just try these out on the instrument. You can see that I've repeated the leap off note so that we really feel how that works, and it gives us something to really aim for. We've played the pitch, so we know what pitch we're aiming for. Leap off this one, repeat it. Leap off this one, repeat it. And the same is true for the arpeggio. Leap off this one. Leap off this one. So that's quite important that they've heard the note that they're leaping to before they leap there. And that brings me on to the fact that pupils in Harmony Liverpool, where I teach, and my private pupils, we do an awful lot of singing and a lot of solfa. So we've done a lot of interval work as well. So we're really building up the ear side of things all the time, which is, of course, absolutely essential. So this brings me on to one new piece of information, and that is that the playing finger you are going to land on has to be in context with the note that follows it. So I see this as being like the third element of the shifting. You have the leap finger, you have the arrival finger, but we also need to think about the next finger that's going to play after the arrival finger. And for me, this is what I sort of say forms the tripod. And as we all know, a tripod is a strong structure. And this tripod concept makes the leap feel so much more secure. What do I mean by this? Let's take that first shift from the G major scale. When I'm leaping to a 1, followed by a 2, I leap to that finger number 1 in context with how 2 feels. And I will leap in a different way if the next finger I'm going to play after that finger number 1 is a 3. Leap to a 3, and I place my finger number 1, the arrival note, in a slightly different way because it's a finger 3 next. The next, let's see what happens if it's a finger number 4. Leap off, leap in a slightly different way because I know that there's a 4 next. So this is just one new little nugget which really sort of does slightly put the icing on the cake of allowing the arm to feel secure in what it's doing. We need a leap off note, we need the arrival note, but the arrival note needs to be in context with the next finger that it's going to play. And that could be on another string, it might even be in another position, but that arrival note has to have a relationship with that next note. So for me, that creates a tripod, and a tripod is a strong structure. This is not something that I point out from the early days, from the very beginning days of leaping, because I feel that would overcomplicate things for young people. But it certainly is a really important, subtle, but useful element, the tripod in the shift. So this brings me on to move away from the beginners and talk about the advanced students, because quite frankly, it is a big topic for advanced students. When they come in their pieces, they will play some things through. You might say to them, how did that feel? Have you got any questions? And often they will say, that leap doesn't feel very, very good. So I'm going to put up on the screen, I'm going to put a little excerpt from the César Franck Sonata, the last movement, because there is therefore going to be a violin quote and a cello quote. And I'm just going to talk you through some troubleshooting. And these are the troubleshooting questions that I ask my advanced students. And I really enjoyed writing them out and seeing how many of them were questions. And the fact that I'm asking them in questions means that I'm steering them towards the right answer, as opposed to just telling them what to do. It sort of encourages a different way of approaching the teacher-student relationship, which feels really healthy. And so questions are very, very important. So let's check out this little bit from the César Franck Sonata. And my first question that I would say to them is the first question that I ask myself, and that is, have you got responsive feet and sit bones? So we would just take that leap one more time, and we would just see whether we can make sure that our feet are responsive. The next thing, and what I'm going to do now, I'm afraid, is just a really quick list, but you can see the slide so you can see how I'm working through this list. Which is the leap off finger? And if it was a leap that wasn't really working, I would get them to just put that finger number in with a staccato mark on top of it, so they know that that is the leap finger that they are going to be leaping off. In this case, it would be that very first F sharp. Then I would say to them, where's the landing note on your instrument? And I might even get them to put their instrument out in front of them. I'll just take the music away from the screen so you see this. And I'd hold their instruments in front of them like this, and I'd say, can you show me where the note is that you're leaping to? If their response is, then they've probably got a little bit more information that they need to put into their brains. Then I ask them, what do you want that landing finger to feel like? So we have a go at what we want it to feel like, but we also feel what it feels like in context with the next note. So we want that to feel like that. So that feels really, really good. The next thing I might ask them is, what is the leap and arrival note interval? So here we've got a minor seventh there. So that's another interesting piece of information that goes into the information bank to help them understand what's going on. Then we do the sub-touching idea, where I would maybe get them to just go and touch an object away from their violins. I might go and get them to touch an object that's in the room, or you could touch a little bit of your violin like this, maybe with closed eyes, so that you're really developing that sensitivity of touch. You're really opening that world of touch. And then we would take the leap slowly. But as we know, we can't leap slowly. So this is the moment where we would just click and go. And the students would be encouraged to check if their feet feel responsive, and then, and I forgot to do the click. And we do that a lot, and really doing that click out aloud. Then if it still was struggling, we'd talk about, have you got true finger, hand, forearm alignment? Is it really all going together, or are some bits going before others, or are some bits getting left behind? So we'd really talk about that true finger, hand, forearm alignment. Then I might say to them, have you got that prep movement propulsion in your forearm? Are you really feeling propulsion? That would be another question. So then I would say, are you leaping at leap speed as opposed to in the tempo of the music? So we would check out what we were thinking. Were we really going at our natural leap speed, or were we adjusting it? And I would say to them, can you feel the tripod? Can you feel the leap finger, the arrival note in context with the next note? So that was a very quick whiz through a list of things, but those are the kind of things that I would do to troubleshoot with my students. This information has really been invaluable to me when it comes to leaping. I really actually almost look forward to leaps when they happen in the context of a piece of music now, which is certainly not where I was up to about 4 or 5 years ago when I came across all this. So happy leaping, everyone. It's a fun thing. Who knew?
Thanks so much for joining us today. We just have a few things we want to share with you. We have our summer symposium coming up in July. So it's July 8th to the 13th. I think I've got that correct. And you can do it online or in person. In person is in Watkins Glen in upstate New York. And online we have various packages. We have a basic package, we have fancier packages with more included, and all of that is available to look at on our website at www.tillproject.com. If you're watching this and you're in Australia, I'll be in Australia very soon. Actually, I'm leaving next week. I'm doing a workshop on the 18th and 19th of May at the University of Queensland, and I'll be teaching as well for the 10 days after that. That's also available on our website. So stay in touch, and thanks for joining us.